Hi there, this is Alan Chatfield from lifestoogood.net. We are about to embark on a very brief presentation of the forming, storming, norming, performing model. It's a business model, but it is a great business model in that it applies to various aspects of life, in fact, anything concerning a team. Before we move on and go through the presentation, I would like to ask you just for a moment to consider when you were last in a team situation, so anything where you had to work with other people. Think about it in terms of how you got along with those people. Was it difficult? Were there any difficulties, any conflicts? How long did it take for the team, for the people you were working with, to come up with whatever it was you got together to achieve in the first place? Okay, now I'm going to give you a slightly different situation to think about. If we think about sports teams and how they are formed and how they perform, any team game is about getting the best performance out of that team, obviously. In the UK here, where we play a lot of soccer, we call it football, you might get very rich club owners who buy the best players in the world and they put them together in the hope that that will form the best team in the world. Of course, putting the best players in the world together doesn't form the best team in the world, because you have to have those players working together in a good way to have a performing team. One of the biggest teams in the UK is a team called Chelsea, owned by a very rich guy. He bought a player called Fernando Torres from another team, Liverpool, for a record sum of 50 or 55 million, some huge sum anyway. And the guy played fantastically well for the previous team, but he's not playing too well for Chelsea. And this is a classic example of a performing team introducing a new element, a new player in this case, going back to the storming phase of this model, as that player has to learn to fit in and learn to play with the other players, which is contributed to by the manager and how the manager goes about aiding that situation. The manager can choose to play the guy or to leave him on the sidelines, to give him the confidence of knowing he has the main role as a striker, or if there's another striker there, then you could have some conflict. You could have some conflict from people who resent him coming to the club, resent his wages. There are all kinds of complicated factors, but it's an example of where you have a team situation and we are trying to get to a performing team, and you have some storming there going on. Now this will become clearer as we go through the model. It's just I want to provide that as food for thought before we get started. Now I'd like you to think of another team situation that you've been in. Again, anything, a work situation, a social situation, a birthday, a wedding, anything where you had to work with other people to achieve something. And compare it to the first one, and think about how different the two were. There must be some differences if they're completely different team situations. Was there more or less conflict between the two? Did it take longer or less time, or the same sort of time to achieve your goals between the two situations? Okay, now I think we're about ready to dive into the presentation. What I would quickly say is I'm going to go through this at quite a pace. There's a lot of information in this presentation, a lot. I wanted it to be a very comprehensive overview of this model. I also don't want to send you to sleep, and therefore I'm going to go through it quite a pace. I'm going to focus more on the slides at the end of the presentation, which are about the application of the model rather than the overview. I think it's quite a straightforward model in any case. To get the best out of the model, the best out of this presentation, I would suggest you listen to this video and then go to the page, lifestoogood.net, click on the work menu. I'll be adding a brand new section called Business Models. This is the very first one, and you can view the model there, the video, but also you can click through the presentation itself, and that way you can take the time to take in all the information from each slide at your own pace. So that would be the way to get the best out of the presentation. So let's go for it. This very first slide, a one-pager, I'm not going to spend too much time on. It's basically something I'm going to intend to put in all of these model presentations for comparison purposes, so we can compare efficiency, effectiveness, and difficulty between the models. So this is more about comparing between presentations. It's not for today. What I'm going to go through, a very brief background, the stages, the application of the model, and maybe some questions and actions at the end. So, background, the model was produced and proposed by a guy called Bruce Tuckman in 1965. He proposed that these are necessary phases for teams to go through in order to grow and perform. Other models have been based on this. It's a pretty well accepted model. I've listed out all of the models that I can think of that are based on this model. So if you want to see other related models, do a Google search. Google will tell you everything these days, and I'm sure you can find the information. You can find the information on this model, but the important thing that I want to get across is not just the information, but how the model can be used, how it's useful. Otherwise, what's the point of the presentation? Tuckman then added a fifth phase called the adjourning phase in 1975, which was really about once you've been in a high-performing team, when you consider human emotion and the humans moving on to do other work, there can be some drop in energy and drop in motivation because they miss being in that performing team. So, diagrammatic representation of the model. Again, Tuckman didn't propose a diagram for this model, so there are various diagrams out there as people try and find their own. I quite like this one because it shows how conflict changes over time. So you can see there, forming stage when we get together, a relatively average amount of conflict. The storming stage, there's a high degree of conflict, and then less conflict as you go through to norming, performing, and adjourning. Okay, so forming is about when the team is put together initially. It's usually quite a comfortable stage to be in. Conflict and issues might be thought of but are generally avoided. People are really in discovery mode during this forming stage. Team members are normally on their best behavior. They're trying to make friends, get to know each other, and also to see a little bit how each other work. Very, very mature members might actually already at this early stage start modeling what they think is the best behavior to make them successful in this team. What can be very practically useful at this stage is to share the model. If this model is known to people in the team, to share, we're actually going to take some time to get to know each other. We're a new team. We're going to go through this forming, storming, norming, performing model. We want to get through the storming as quickly as we can. So let's move on. The next stage is storming. So once the team is formed, once people understand what is the intention, you might get people vying for position. This is where conflict comes up, where issues need to be addressed, where uncertainties need to be addressed. The leader needs to step up and resolve conflicts. If you have two people competing for the same role where only one should do that role, a decision needs to be made. This is not the time for a leader to go and hide behind a rock. This is a time for clear communication. This is the storming stage. This is the stage every team needs to get through. One point to make is when everything is going quite well, you might think, well, we didn't have a storming stage. Every team has a storming stage. The storming stage might be quite a friendly discussion about, how are we going to think about this situation? If there are conflicts and even in a friendly way, any uncertainties need to be addressed so that the team can move on. Everybody knows their position, where they stand. That's the norming stage, and then the team can finally perform. So storming doesn't necessarily mean people throwing things at each other and chairs getting knocked over, but storming is where conflicts, issues, and uncertainties get addressed. I'm going to flick through the slides there and you can see them in the presentation afterwards. Once we've got through the storming stage, then the team starts to norm. People know where they stand. The team structure is clear. People take responsibility, and there is a consensus, and roles are accepted. People might accept their roles in a kind of begrudging way. They might accept their roles. Okay, this is not the ideal role I wanted, but I'll do it for the good of the team. Once we've got through the norming stage, it is possible to move on to the performing stage. Now, I write here it is possible because teams could just stay in the norming stage. The performing stage, high-performing teams are all about functioning as a unit. The team is motivated and knowledgeable. Team members are now competent and autonomous. In this phase, people are concentrating on overachieving their goals, not on performing. So not on just doing the job, but doing more than is asked, and doing the best job they possibly can. If the team is just doing the job, then you have a team that's still in the norming phase. And the other thing, to get back to the football analogy we started with, of course, once the team is in the performing stage, it doesn't necessarily stay in the performing stage. A team that is high performing could be disrupted. A change in leadership or a change in personnel in the team can flip the team right back to the storming stage. They have to rebond, and people need to know how this new element is going to fit into the team. So that happens all the time in sports, in football, in baseball, and etc. when new styles are introduced or new management is introduced. In the performing stage, the leader is maybe less directive, but is able to delegate more, because the delegation is not going to cause issues with the team members. The additional stage, as I mentioned before, is the adjourning stage, also called the mourning stage. Okay, application of the model. The model is suitable for all team building situations, again, not just particular ones, not just business, any industry sector, and there's no time, there's no set time for each stage. It absolutely changes with every situation. Use of the model. The use of the model is really around understanding and knowledge. So to apply the model is really about identifying which stage you're at, considering what needs to be done to move to the performing stage, and reviewing where the team is so that you can adjust the behavior to suit the stage. So here we have the model again, and I've mapped on the team feelings and the leader's role in that situation. So again, high direction in the early stages, less direction in the latter stages because the team is starting to norm and then ideally perform. But in the performing stage, we can add a high degree of delegation is possible. So the application of the model, which is the important part, be understanding. Remember, this model is a natural progression, so this is probably one of the most important things. Understanding the model can really help with team development. Schedule accordingly, so understand that if you're in the storming stage, the same task won't be done as quickly in the storming stage as it would be done in the performing stage, obviously. Manage expectations, be realistic when you're thinking about how much progress should be made by when, and measure success against realistic goals. Set the team up for success. Communicate progress. The best way to help a team grow is clear, consistent communication. Poor communication, particularly in the storming stage, is disastrous. If there is a high degree of conflict, the worst thing that can happen is to have mismatched messaging or a team leader that is nowhere to be seen. So clear communication, particularly in the storming stage, will greatly help the team. Set appropriate targets. Having targets or markers along the way can really help a team to see its progress and make the effort worthwhile. Finally, don't abuse the model. This is more about, once we have the understanding of this model, use it in the right way for positive impact. If somebody is swearing or throwing things around the room, we don't use the storming stage as an excuse for that. You don't say, okay, well, he's misbehaving himself, but that's just because we're in the storming stage. No, the model is about moving through that as quickly as possible to get to the performing stage. Once again, I would ask you to think of the situations you've been involved in now that we've gone through the model, and how does that relate to this model? Maybe go back to the ones we thought of at the beginning of the presentation. How did it relate to the model? Can you now identify with the storming and the norming and maybe the performing stages? Any team situations you're in now when you're working with people, what stage would you say you're at? Use your understanding of this model for patience, productivity, and performance. Performance is what we want to get to with the model. Patience, the model can help you be more patient because you understand these are phases we need to get through. Productivity, you understand that if you use the model to help resolve issues, help reassure people, then conflicts resolved quicker will improve productivity. And now you have the understanding of the model, what it takes to build a high-performing team. Use it wisely. Okay, that's it from me. I hope that's been helpful. I would really, really appreciate any feedback. As I said, this is my very first presentation. We're going to put in a new section on the website. I would love it if you would go to the website, lifestogood.net, under the work section, and leave a comment, even just say hi. But I'd love to get some feedback. Was it too fast, too slow? And did you find it useful? That would be great. Thank you very much for your time. Take care and best wishes. Bye-bye.